of Minneapolis. And we're glad that you could join us today for this technical briefing on the proposed Hiawatha campus expansion on what's known as the Roof Depot site. Just want to share with you a couple of things before we begin. This site was purchased by the city in 2016 for $6.4 million.
It says
The
6 million in county records.
Pardon?
I think he was asking if it was 6.8 million. That's the number that I think I have too.
Yes,
so, okay.
6.8 million. Sorry. So I guess that right there, I'll start and say, if we could hold the questions to the end, that would be helpful, because that's super. I mean, it is great that we can do this way for the ability to gather everyone together quickly, but it is pretty distracting to have to manage through a lot of questions at once. And we do want to get to the information that Bron is going to present for you. So I think one of the bigger things in this project is that this site has on it a really out of date, not usable warehouse building that has been known as the Roof Depot building. That building, in order for the plan for the expanded Hiawatha campus to move forward, which has been in the works for over 10 years, the city has to be able to demolish the building to bring it down. And that's what we want to talk with you about today, both the process that has been approved by several regulators, including the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, the sufficiency of a voluntary EAW that the city did on this project was upheld by the Minnesota Court of Appeals recently. There was also a ruling last night by Judge Wall that upheld and supported every single argument the city has made to deny a temporary restraining order. We are aware of the issue that Judge Wall did do an injunction which allows for an appeal to the Court of Appeals, and we can talk about that at the end after the scientific presentation by Bron. So I think that it would be super helpful if we move over to Justin Michael. He is professional geologist in Minnesota, licensed with the Bron Intertech Corporation, and the senior scientist, environmental project manager for the city of Minneapolis's Hiawatha campus expansion project. With him is Steve Jansen, professional geologist, Minnesota, Bron Intertech, vice president and principal scientist, project consultant for the city of Minneapolis Hiawatha facility. So want to make sure that you have their names, and we're going to, we know we have a limited time with you, but we want them to present on the issues that come up almost repeatedly about the site, about the safety of bringing this building down in a safe manner, removing it from the site, the levels of arsenic on the site, and also, I would say, addressing some of the other issues that people bring up that aren't relevant to this particular site. So Justin and Steve, I'm going to let you take over here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Jansen, and this is my associate here, Justin Michael. In the interest of time, I'm going to kind of give the rundown, and then Justin will kind of help chime in if we get some questions here on the more details. And I guess what we want to do is just give you a quick overview of Bron's role, just a little bit of the property history, which pertains to, why we're even here today talking about this. And then we'll do a quick talk through of, the investigation work that's been done, the cleanup plan that's been prepared and has been approved by the regulatory agencies. And then, what that cleanup is going to look like when the city moves forward here with the project. So That being said, we're, Braun's role, we are the city's environmental consultant for this project. We, were retained back in 2015 by the city before they acquired the property. And, we've been helping them ever since with the due diligence and, evaluating the environmental conditions at the site. The property itself, as was mentioned, it's referred to as the Roof Depot building. This site has been developed since the early 1900s. It started its life as a coal storage facility and then had various warehousing and machine shop and other commercial development up into 1947 when the current building was constructed by Sears, Roebuck and Company. And, ever since then, it has, been, a massive warehouse facility. The current building takes up about 3/4 of the property. That building has been sitting, vacant since the early 2000s. And it obviously was in disrepair. And, as was mentioned, the city acquired it here in 2016. So, the other, I guess, notable thing is just the location of that property. Immediately east of it is the former CMC Heartland Partners Light Yard Superfund site, which is still a active listed site with the state of Minnesota due to historical, before the current warehouse was built on that adjoining site, it used to be a rail yard, and back between the late 30s and the late 60s, there was a pesticide manufacturing facility there that handled arsenic products, and that arsenic, some of you may know, was dispersed in the general area during historical operations, and also resulted in groundwater contamination. And there is a groundwater plume that migrates off that site westward under the Roof Depot property. So, based on that knowledge and history of the property at the time the city was looking at acquiring it, the city voluntarily joined in both the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's voluntary investigation and cleanup programs, and has been working with both those agencies since then to make sure the site has been properly investigated and will get properly cleaned up as part of redevelopment. And the reason why there's two agencies there is the MPCA. It deals with contamination from petroleum and other non-petroleum products, with the exception of arsenic that comes from pesticide manufacturing, and pesticide or agricultural chemical contamination like the arsenic is under the jurisdiction of the MEA, Minnesota Department of Ag. So that's why that program is involved. So as part of the investigation process, the city has commissioned over 100 different soil borings and soil probes to, test the soil and groundwater conditions at the site. And, as part of those investigative activities, there's been, hundreds of samples of the soil tested, as well as groundwater and vapor testing. If you want to share that site investigation map, it gives you, when this comes up here, all these little dots on this map represent, areas on the Roof Depot property and the adjoining existing city property that, have been evaluated, since 2015. So, what that investigation has told us is that, like many properties in the city of Minneapolis, the shallow soil is historical fill material that has, various contaminants in it that are typical for, urban commercial areas, as well as, some debris containing material like ash and slag. And that, soil levels, generally in some areas are above state standards for commercial development, and will require cleanup or management as part of redevelopment of the site. Also, as already was known, the groundwater underlying the property is contaminated from this adjacent Superfund site with dissolved arsenic. That groundwater is not an issue from a redevelopment of the property because it occurs at a depth of 40 feet below the ground surface. And because we're in Minneapolis and everybody's on, city municipal water supply, the groundwater contamination is being monitored at the state level, but it's not a, issue for redevelopment or reuse of the property. So, that being said, that investigation work has been done in cooperation with both the MPCA and the MDA. And over the last couple of years, as the development plans for the property have, come to fruition, the Braun has been working with the city team to develop a cleanup plan. And there's been several iterations of the cleanup plan that have been developed. The most recent version with amendments was in fall of 2022. And since that time, that plan has been submitted to the state of, to the MPCA as well as the MDA. Both agencies now have, approved that plan, which means it's ready to implement. The plan itself is called a response action plan, abbreviated RAP. So you may have seen a copy of that. I know it's been, circulated at previous public meetings, and I think some of the press have received a copy of that. And, the basics of that plan, the reason we have that plan is to make sure that the soil issues at the site are properly managed during redevelopment and addressed to the satisfaction of both the state agencies. And, the plan starts with demolishing the, existing roof depot building, and really, the building itself doesn't have any issues other than it, is a very old building. It had various amounts of asbestos containing materials in it, as buildings of that vintage do. The city has already abated, 90+% of those materials that were in the building. There's a little bit of material left that will be dealt with, at the time demolition occurs. So, and as part of the demolition, then the soil cleanup plan that is out there and part of this RAP will be implemented, and the purpose of the soil cleanup is going to be to, remove any near surface contaminated soils that are exceeding cleanup standards at the state level. And it's a combination of, if we want to go back to the map that was up, there's, several smaller areas that have arsenic in the contaminated fill soil that's going to be cleaned up. We'll wait for that to come up there. Those are the three areas depicted in pink. And, although those areas need cleaning up of the values that we found in the soil in those areas, I think only one of the test results really had a very elevated level for this property itself. It was maybe around 100 microgram per kilogram. The rest of the soil in those red areas that are going to get cleaned up are really fairly low levels of arsenic from comparison to background known in this area of Minneapolis. So those areas, along with other shallow surface soil throughout the site, is going to be monitored and remediated as part of the redevelopment activities. One of the important parts of the RAP is going to be monitoring earthwork activities and demolition activities to make sure that there are not a lot of fugitive dust emissions. And so that approved plan, once again, that's been approved by both MPCA and MDA, has provisions in it for doing perimeter continuous air monitoring around the edges of the site to, monitor, actual numerical dust emission levels. And then there are trigger values in the plan that, should, any elevated dust be detected, there's provisions to temporarily halt work and to implement, additional dust control measures. As with all projects like this in the metro area, the plans and specifications for both demolition and earthwork already plan for dust control and keeping streets clean adjacent to the site and whatnot. Those are all typical engineering measures that any redevelopment project in a city has to undertake. So this project, just because of potential neighborhood concerns, the city has gone kind of above and beyond typical engineering procedures to really make sure things get done in a safe and efficient manner. And then, at the end of the day, once all this environmental work is completed, there'll be a final, very detailed documentation report that, goes into both state agencies for, review and approval. And, every step of the way during the cleanup, there's regulatory involvement, just to make sure the project is going as designed. So that's really our, quick summary. I guess maybe we can, kick it back to the city here and see how we want to handle, questions.
Okay, coming off mute here. So I think that what we'd like to do is have Bess actually run the question and answers for us here, and we will do our very best, the technical team and the city, to answer the questions. And if there's something that we need to follow up with, our very capable team will get information back to all of you.
Great, thanks, Margaret. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and we'll go in the order that I see your hands raised. So Kyle, go ahead.
Hi, Kyle Stokes with MinPost. So maybe the experts can speak to this. The exact steps that are taken to remediate the property. I mean, my understanding from reading the RAP is that you basically wet down all of the surfaces and contain, contaminated soil and things like this. And I guess, like, if I'm a layperson reading that, it sounds like a low-tech solution to a problem. You're in a neighborhood that's had historic levels of contamination from arsenic, had this huge Superfund cleanup, and the plan is to wet things down with water. It isn't necessarily something that to a layperson inspires a ton of confidence. I'm wondering if you can talk to how typical that is, and address that concern that it's like your plan is water. Well, it's like the expert for the plaintiff said, it's going to get on someone's tire. It's going to get tracked out of the facility. It's going to break down at some point.
Sure, I'm happy to address that. Is that a typical way to do things? Based on the type of contaminants we have on this site and the levels of contaminants we have, this is industry standard how these types of sites are cleaned up. When you look at the arsenic levels that have actually been found on the Roof Depot property and say compare them to the levels that were found on the adjoining Superfund site, we're talking the levels that are being found on the Roof Depot property are 1,000 times less than some of the levels being found on the adjacent Superfund site. And in fact, we're actually the cleanup standard that is being undertaken on the Roof Depot property for arsenic is half of what the cleanup standard was used by EPA for the, residential properties in the neighborhood. So right now, really arsenic is I guess I view it as a very minor issue on this property. The levels pale by comparison to what was on the adjoining property, and that's why the adjoining property was on the state Superfund as far as from a regulatory standpoint. So the added precautions here are a very detailed air monitoring program, which most redevelopment projects in the Twin Cities rarely have that kind of air monitoring as kind of an added layer of safety, just to make sure. I guess any other things you want to add to that,
so
Justin?
the other things that have been considered as part of the project design is very rigorous erosion control and stormwater control designs. And as part of that, I know that the design team had considered and it plans to implement very strict not just on-site protocols for making sure that equipment's clean, but also street sweeping and stuff like that to really, again, mitigate any kind of potential loss of mass from the site, if you will, that's not dedicated, removals of impacted materials and sent to treatment facilities, licensed or permitted treatment facilities. So, yeah, hopefully that helps.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, guys. All right, Susan, you're up next.
Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Jansen. Has this presentation been offered to the community members in the East Phillips community with opportunities for folks there who are concerned about this process to ask detailed questions about it?
I would say yes, we can let the city address
Yeah.
that, but there were two-hour public meetings. I guess it was probably last fall here, right
Yes.
after the cleanup plan was formalized.
I can help with that, Susan. In October, as part of the negotiation with EP&I that resulted in the two memorandums of understanding that were passed 13-0 by the city council and signed by the mayor, one part of that was to offer a briefing for the leaders and whoever EP&I wanted to bring to those briefings. We did that in October, I believe early October. Braun was there and we spent, I believe, about 4.5 hours together with the community, Braun answering a whole series of questions about the site.
Anything else, or we'll move on to Andrew. You're next.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. Just to follow up a little bit on the air monitoring procedures for this, I did speak to several people who were in that October 5th meeting, and going over the RIP myself, I wasn't totally clear on this. Is that air monitoring, is that a live thing, or is that a thing where you guys will have to measure the levels recorded in that outside of the site, or later than that? Or I'm wondering if you guys are going to be able to react to elevated levels should they arise in real time, or is that you getting that information later?
Answer.
Yeah, why don't you take
Yeah, thanks for the question, Andrew. So the air monitoring program that we're intending to deploy will involve multiple monitoring locations where they're taking measurements every second with programmable thresholds that send alerts instantly to, it'll be to myself and other various staff on site that are part of the control measures, the engineering measures to implement the wrap. So
Interesting, thank you. And then just to follow up briefly on that, the process itself for demolition, I'm wondering if you could say roughly, I realize you're not Rachel contracting, but how long, like how many days this process is, and is there going to be a big boom moment as part of this, like a traditional style demolition, I've seen them in the past, and like in the event that is part of this process, I guess obviously you have plans to mitigate dust. I understand that, but in that real time, like what does that sort of tend to do to, particulate matter pollution in real time in that instance?
If you guys don't want to answer that, I think Barbara O'Brien, and Barbara, you should identify yourself, and then maybe add in from there.
Can I add one comment before Barbara jumps in? So on the building itself, the building is not contaminated. So
Right.
the issue in the building is asbestos, and that, by law is there's a little bit left. So that'll be all out of there. So yeah, what you're dealing with from a demolition will be, fugitive dust just from, the demolition itself, not necessarily contaminated dust like the potential is for the soil. But with that, we'll let Barbara maybe answer that on duration.
Excuse me. Sure, I'll be happy to talk about a couple of the points that you brought up, and please ask the question again if I don't cover everything. So you asked about a big boom.
Barbara, will you identify yourself for the reporters, what your role is?
I most certainly will. Thank you, Margaret. My name is Barbara O'Brien. I think you can see the spelling on the moniker on the screen. I am the Director of Property Services for the City of Minneapolis. So you asked about a big boom. And I think that what you were referring to is an demolition by implosion. And this particular project, Rachel Contracting is not going to be employing that as a means and methods of using for demolition. So under those circumstances, will there just be a one large boom and the building will be on the ground? It will follow a more traditional demolition process. We think that it will take somewhere around a month to complete. And I think that Bron already answered the question about dust monitoring while demolition is in play. So Andrew, if there's anything that I missed, please re-ask and I'll be happy to address.
No, that covers it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Adam, you're up next.
Hey folks, this is Adam Duxter with WCCO TV. I just wanted to ask, with the news of this morning, right, with this injunction, kind of how that impacts the city. I know that these plans are moving kind of full steam ahead and could have started as soon as this Tuesday. And I apologize if some of this might seem repetitive, but I'm just curious the impact this does have on the city now and just kind of what this means moving forward.
So I think I can help with that. So last night, Judge Wall ruled in favor of the city on every single argument against a temporary restraining order. However, this morning, Judge Wall was putting in an injunction so the plaintiffs could appeal to the Court of Appeals. And that's where we sit today. So we cannot, in this moment, demo the building. We can continue on site preparation, and that is where we are at.
And just to jump in quick, Margaret, I did put in the statement from our city attorney's office in the chat, if everyone can see that. And if you can't, certainly I will follow up after.
So the point is the Court of Appeals can review what Judge Wall has already said, which Judge Wall has ruled in favor of the city on every count.
And just to follow up on that, if I may, I'm not as familiar, and as do I think most common folk are not familiar with how this appeal process could work and kind of what impact this could have on the timeline. But you say everything goes best case scenario for the city, you get this appeal back, and it's, plan is still on. How does this impact your timeline for demolition? Does this have cost implications for, this is a plan that could have started on Tuesday. Is there an additional cost because we're now waiting to start this plan? And I guess those two big things, cost and then timeline, how it has the biggest impact.
So I think the city attorney's office and our finance department are going to be reviewing that after this injunction this morning. And then Judge Wall did invite more information to come to him based on those factors. So that's in process.
All right, thank you. Looks like Justine is up next. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Justine Jones with Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine here. So I know that East Phillips residents, in addition to the potential for arsenic exposure, are concerned about the potential for added air pollution to the neighborhood with the influx of work trucks and other commuter cars that will be traveling to and from the public works facility. So I'm curious if the city has an estimate of how many trucks and vehicles will be traveling to the facility daily, and does it have any plans in place to mitigate the potential for added air pollution in the neighborhood?
So I think after this, Justine, we can provide for you the travel demand management document that was done in conjunction with this project. Has a lot of information in it, particularly in the 7.0 section of it. And we would be here for a whole hour if we go through it together. But the point is, there has been a ton of work done. Originally, one of the things done was this called for a nearly 600 car parking ramp that has been reduced significantly down. The type of vehicles in the negotiations that the mayor led with EPNI and the community over the last year made an even stronger commitment to the electrification of vehicles at this site in the city fleet. And that was approved by the city council as well in that offered memorandum of understanding that passed twice, 13-0. And then the other thing I would say is that there's a lot of discussion of diesel vehicles. The number of diesel vehicles will be very low on the site. And many of those that have been counted into this are the very sort of thing that you see out removing snow today. So something like a skid steer. That skid steer is not going to be running on site at this location. It gets loaded to a flatbed, it gets taken out on site. And so, we do declare that there are diesel vehicles, but the major vehicles that will be coming in and out of the site are both gasoline powered or electric vehicles.
Great, thank you. Andrew, you have another question. Go for it.
Hi, yes, thank you. Margaret, you've referenced the MOU that was passed unanimously by the city council on the 26th of January a couple of times. My understanding is that the Neighborhood Institute board voted to reject that memorandum of understanding. I'm just wondering what your understanding, not to use the term understanding again, of how that impacts that agreement. Like, where does that leave you guys now with that agreement? Like, does the city still stand by those proposals, even if the group is not formally agreeing to that at this point?
So we are still hopeful that the members of EPNI will reevaluate their position, particularly because I understand, I only got to listen to part of the hearing today, but my understanding is at the end, the judge urged their counsel to go back and reconsider the offer that has been made by the city. And I think that is an important point here. That MOU is still available for signature by the EPNI community. It would give them exclusive development rights to 3 acres, 3 acres of the 7 point, sorry, I can't get it right off the top of my head, somebody else.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's with a number of other things that come around that memorandum of understanding that can give assurance during the process, after the process, and what the vision for the community is to work in partnership together. So that still stands. That's still an open offer for their consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a question in the chat from Regina with NPR. She's wondering, will you be asking nearby residents to leave their homes on the day that the city demolishes the building? And what guidance would you give nearby residents?
So I'm looking for Barbara to come back on camera too, but there is no need to leave people's homes during the demolition of the building. This is, as described, it's not an implosion. It is going to be more of a take down a section of the building by knocking it down, put it in a truck, haul it away. Next section, put it in a truck, haul it away. It's going off site. So there's no need for residents to leave their homes.
Did you have anything to add, Barbara, or does that cover it?
Margaret covered it very well. There is no need for residents to leave, and the city of Minneapolis will not be asking surrounding residents to leave their homes during this process or at any specific process during the demolition.
Great, thank you. Justine, you have another question. Go ahead.
Oops, sorry, I think I accidentally hit that. I'll take it off. I'm all set.
All right, Adam, go for it.
Apologies there. It's kind of a two-parter, and again, I just kind of for the city folks, just let me know, if this is something that maybe you don't feel the most comfortable answering, but I'm just curious and feel like it bears asking. I mean, it's no secret that this has been contentious all this week in particular, between folks that live in this area, folks that are in opposition to this, and even city council members at times. I'm just curious, as you go through with a plan like this, say everything does go through the way you're hoping, how do you kind of balance that relationship with the community? And I'm curious if you have any takeaways of what has been a wild week of discussion and debate in the city chambers. And I mean, at points, it feels like threats have been made or insinuated. I'm sure that you don't deal with that a lot in public works, or maybe you do. I don't know, but I'm curious or any takeaway into kind of how you're balancing this week.
So I think some of that is better directed to the policymakers than, Barbara or myself as representatives of Public Works and Property Services. What I can tell you is, how we're going to get through this is continued communication. And the mayor is very committed to continued communication with residents of Little Earth, with the Urban Indian Coalition. It's actually MUD, Minnesota Urban Indian Directors Group, as well as EPNI, since the mayor did lead that negotiation for over a year here. And then the other thing is, there are significant things on this site that are beneficial to the community. The 3 acres for their own development, for how their vision can be realized on those 3 acres. There's a job training center that we have reinserted into the project that is going to be very important to the community. That's a job training center that will train for all types of work within the public works area. And, I have to share, Public Works is actually the largest department in the city with over 1,000 employees. And it's an important part of our work to have a workforce that is representative of the city that people are serving. And so that job training center is a very exciting part of this for the community, and actually was one of the earliest things put back into that memorandum of understanding. We're committed to that no matter what happens here. And so I think, Adam, some of your questions are maybe best directed to some of the elected folks versus those of us who are in appointed positions.
Totally fair. Thanks for taking a go at it.
Thank you. Heidi Wigdahl, you're up next.
Hello, I just had a clarification question because you were talking about the parking ramp and reducing that number. I know EPNI has been using the number 888 parking spaces. So I just want to know exactly what does the plan call for?
So I'm going to ask actually Brett to come on camera. Brett is Deputy Director in Public Works, and I think that number comes from a different place than the number of parking spaces in the ramp. So Brett, if you wouldn't mind identifying yourself and addressing what sometimes becomes a bit of confusion between total daily trips to the site versus the parking ramp spaces and the vehicle storage spaces.
Thank you. I think, yeah, okay. Brett Jelly, I'm Deputy Director of Public Works. And yeah, so actually was just scrambling here on within the even the travel demand management document that was part of our environmental assessment worksheet. There is a combination of both surface spaces, and surface spaces can hold a trailer with a Bobcat on it, or a pickup truck, or a heavier piece of equipment, but also personal vehicles as people show up for work. And so on page 15 of that PDF, you'll see an 888 number that reflects all spaces.
So what Brett's saying is that's beyond just the ramp. And I believe that may be the unified site as well.
That is correct.
And if I could dovetail on that as well, just because there are identified spots, that is not a direct reflection of the amount of trips in and out of the site each day. As Brett was talking about, it might be a Bobcat or a piece of equipment on a trailer that would constitute one spot.
All right, thank you. And it looks like we have one last question here from Kyle. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if this was a not minor issue during the hearing, but the potential for the delay opening up the risk of future occupation style protests. How concerned are you about security on the premises, keeping folks out of the premises? And the judge was also concerned about risk to people who might enter the building, that it might, I'm curious if you can speak to any of that.
Can you say the end part again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you trailed off.
The judge was worried about the potential for people who might be occupying the property, might not just be on the property as they were the other day, but in the building itself. This was something that the judge raised as a concern, and I'm curious the extent to which the city's worried about all of that.
Well, I think anytime the city has a property like this that is not in day-to-day use yet, there's always a concern for people trespassing on that property, and that would be the case here. It's not a safe property for people to be occupied in because of both, should someone get into the building has no heat, no electricity. It actually does have water, has had water in it, so it has some mold in it. And I think it's not a safe place for people to be in. The second part of that is even the surface lot itself, with the amount of snow and the conditions that we have, we do not feel it's safe for people to be there. People are certainly have their First Amendment rights to be able to protest outside the site itself. And I suspect that will continue. That has happened before, and it is very likely to happen again. And people have a right to do that.
All right, thank you. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. I don't know if Margaret, Steve, Justin, Barbara, if you have anything else you want to add.
I just want to thank everyone for coming today, and certainly feel free to reach out if you need follow-up from the technical information. Again, we would not be going forward with this project if the city of Minneapolis did not believe it was a safe project and a project that is going to improve the area. One of the things that's important to this area is cleaning up these industrial sites and having them become something different that can benefit the use. And so here, the good jobs of the city are coming to an area. It is also going to have a training center on it, and the offer is still there for the community to see their vision through as well. This project, once again, has been approved by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Every court case to date in terms of a ruling has been in favor of the city, including the Court of Appeals finding the voluntary EAW as sufficient. So I think that is why we wanted to have this conversation today. We appreciate you all being here. I'll see if Braun has something they want to add in conclusion.
Yeah, I think from our standpoint, like say, we've been involved with this since 2015, and really the city, I think, has gone above and beyond as a volunteer to make sure, you know, the site was properly investigated and that we've got a sound cleanup plan here to implement.
And I would just take the opportunity to mirror Margaret's comments, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for your wonderful questions. And again, if there are further questions that any of us can follow up with, we'd be happy to do so. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone.